A millionaire took a homeless woman to his ex-fiancée's wedding, and what she did shocked everyone. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new dramatic stories. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more heart-touching films. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Now, let us return to our main character. The rain fell in silver sheets over New York City, drumming against car roofs and pooling in the cracked sidewalks. Beneath the glowing marquee of an old coffee shop, a man in a tailored charcoal suit stood still, his expression unreadable. That man was Ethan Cole, 32, a self-made millionaire and CEO of Cole Industries. To the world, he was composed and untouchable. But tonight, his jaw was clenched, his eyes sharp with something between pain and defiance. He had just received an invitation that reopened an old wound, his ex-fiancée's wedding. The woman who had left him the moment his company stumbled, the woman who had chosen security over love. The world might see a powerful businessman attending with grace, but inside, Ethan wanted only one thing: to show her that he had risen again. Not with revenge, but with dignity. Still, he could not walk into that grand ballroom alone, not after the whispers, not after the headlines that had once humiliated him. He needed someone to stand beside him, someone unexpected. Across the street, under the pale glow of a flickering street lamp, a young woman sat huddled on the concrete, clutching a thin cardboard sign that read, "Just need a chance." Her hair was damp, her fingers pale from the cold. She was Lena Brooks, 26, once a hotel waitress before life crumbled beneath hospital bills and eviction notices. She had learned how invisible a person could become when they had nothing left. As the wind carried another burst of rain, Ethan crossed the street toward her. The sound of his shoes echoed on the wet pavement. Lena looked up, startled to see a man in a suit offering her his umbrella. "Are you all right?" His voice was steady, low. She hesitated, unsure if it was pity or mockery. "I am fine," she murmured, though her lips were trembling. Ethan studied her for a long second. The streak of rain across her cheek looked like a tear she refused to shed. Something in her quiet dignity caught him off guard. He spoke again, measured and calm. "I am attending a wedding tonight. I need someone to accompany me. It is complicated. You will be paid for your time, dinner, transportation, and a place to stay afterward. No strings attached." Lena blinked, confused. "You need me? For a wedding?" "Yes," he said simply. "I need someone who does not belong to that world. Someone real." She stared at him, waiting for the cruel punchline that never came. "You are serious?" "Completely." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a sleek silver card, and offered it to her. "Ethan Cole." Her eyes widened slightly at the name. She had seen it before, printed on billboards above luxury cars and skyscrapers. "You are that Ethan Cole?" He nodded once. "For tonight, just Ethan." She hesitated. Every instinct told her to walk away, but the drizzle had soaked through her thin coat, and her stomach had not felt a real meal in 2 days. She glanced at the umbrella he still held over her head. "Why me?" Ethan exhaled softly. "Because you will not pretend." For a long second, neither moved. Then Lena slowly took the card, her hand trembling slightly as their fingers brushed. "All right," she said quietly. "I will go." A black limousine pulled up to the curb as if summoned by fate. The driver stepped out, holding the door open. Ethan gestured for her to enter first. Inside, the warmth and soft leather seats felt almost unreal after nights spent on park benches. Lena kept her eyes down, whispering, "You must think this is crazy." "Maybe," Ethan replied, his tone dry but not unkind. "But sometimes crazy makes people honest." Outside, the city lights blurred through the rain, streaking gold and white across the windows. For the first time in months, Lena's reflection did not look like a stranger. And for Ethan Cole, a man who had lost faith in both love and truth, something about that reflection stirred the faintest spark of curiosity. Neither of them knew it yet, but this strange deal under the rain would become the turning point of their lives. The limousine rolled smoothly through the slick streets, the soft hum of the engine mixing with the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. Inside, the silence between Ethan and Lena felt thick but not uncomfortable. The city lights painted gold streaks across her reflection as she tried to steady her breathing. Everything around her seemed too polished, too far from the world she had lived in just hours ago. Ethan sat across from her, hands folded, eyes fixed on the blurred skyline beyond the glass. He spoke first, his tone calm but measured. "Before we arrive, there are a few things you should know." Lena looked up, clutching the strap of her borrowed handbag. "All right, this is not about deception," he continued. "I'm not asking you to pretend to be someone you are not. You will use your real name. You will say as little as possible, and if anyone asks how we met, tell them the truth: we met by chance." She blinked, uncertain. "By chance? In the rain?" Ethan's lips curved slightly. "Yes, they will think it is a lie, which makes it perfect." The car glided to a stop in front of the Regency Grand Hotel, a towering building lit like a jewel box. Through the window, Lena saw elegant guests stepping from sleek cars, dressed in designer gowns and tuxedos. Her throat tightened. "I do not belong there," she whispered. Ethan turned toward her, his expression unreadable but his voice low and steady. "You belong exactly where I decide you do tonight. You are my guest. That is all they need to know." Before she could respond, the driver opened the door. Ethan stepped out first, extending his hand. The umbrella shielded her from the rain as she followed him into the grand marble lobby. Warm light washed over everything: crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, champagne laughter. Lena felt like she had stepped into another planet. Ethan guided her to a side hallway near the ballroom entrance. "Wait here for a moment," he said. He reached into his jacket and handed her a small folded paper. Inside was a simple handwritten note. "Agreement for one evening. You accompany me as my guest. No physical contact. No false representation. You will be paid and provided with a room for the night. Signed, Ethan Cole." Lena stared at the neat handwriting, then looked up at him. "You actually wrote a contract for this?" He met her eyes evenly. "I believe in clear terms. It prevents misunderstandings." She smiled faintly. "That is the most honest dishonesty I have ever heard." Ethan's gaze softened for a brief second. "Sign it, or walk away. It is your choice." Lena hesitated only a moment before taking the silver pen from his pocket. The initials EC glimmered on the barrel. As she signed her name, the ink shimmered under the chandelier light. She handed it back carefully. "I guess that makes it official." "It does," Ethan said quietly, tucking the paper into his jacket. "And you can keep the pen. Consider it a small token." For the first time that night, she smiled, a real, unguarded smile. People usually give flowers, not pens. "I am not very good at flowers," he replied. They walked together toward the ballroom. The distant sound of a string quartet floated through the air, mingling with the laughter of the city's elite. As they approached the doors, Lena caught sight of her reflection again in a tall mirror, her borrowed dress. Her damp hair twisted up by a stylist who had worked quickly, the faint shimmer of makeup that could not hide the exhaustion in her eyes. "Do I look all right?" she asked softly. Ethan studied her for a moment, his voice low but sure. "You look real. That is rarer than you think." Her pulse fluttered. She looked away, trying to steady herself. When they stepped through the grand doors, a wave of warmth and chatter washed over them. Dozens of eyes turned their way. Ethan straightened his shoulders, the mask of the calm, powerful CEO settling over him once more. He leaned slightly toward her and murmured, "Remember, you are not here to impress anyone. You are here because I asked you to be." The chandelier lights caught in his hair as he spoke, and for a moment she saw not arrogance, but something weary in his eyes. Across the room, near the stage draped in white roses, a woman in a silk gown turned Victoria, Ethan's former fiancée. Her laughter faltered the instant she saw them. Lena felt the shift in the air before she understood it. Whispered voices rippled through the crowd. "Is that him? Who is she?" Ethan ignored them all. He took Lena's hand not tightly, just enough to steady her, and guided her to a table near the front. His ex's gaze burned from across the room, a flash of jealousy behind her perfect smile. The host's voice boomed through the microphone, welcoming the guests. Laughter and applause filled the air again, but the tension at their table remained. Lena leaned closer, her whisper barely audible. "I think everyone here already hates me." Ethan's mouth twitched into something close to a smile. "Then you are doing it right." She let out a small, nervous laugh, her heart still pounding. The waiter poured champagne. Crystal clinked. From somewhere behind them, a guest murmured, "Cole must be desperate to bring someone like her." Ethan heard it too, but his expression did not change. Instead, he raised his glass and said softly, "Welcome to my world, Lena. Just smile. They feed on fear." She looked at him, startled by his calmness and maybe by the flicker of warmth behind his words. The orchestra began to play again, and the night moved on. But deep down, neither of them knew that this contract evening was about to unravel everything they both thought they understood about pride, status, and love. The string quartet played softly in the background, while champagne glasses chimed like distant bells. Every conversation inside the ballroom seemed polished, rehearsed, and dipped in gold. Lena sat stiffly beside Ethan, her fingers resting lightly on the stem of her glass. The scent of roses and perfume made the air feel heavier than it should. Ethan looked perfectly composed. His posture, his controlled smile, the way he nodded at passing executives, everything about him radiated wealth and authority. Yet underneath that calm surface, there was tension in his jaw. He could feel Victoria's gaze from across the room, sharp and assessing. "Relax," Ethan murmured quietly without turning to her. "I am trying," Lena whispered back, "but everyone is staring." That is because they are bored," he said, his tone dry. "Let them look. You have nothing to prove." The waiter appeared with the dinner menu. Lena glanced down at the polished silverware and realized she did not even know which fork to use. Ethan caught the hesitation in her movement. Without a word, he adjusted his napkin, picked up the correct fork, and began eating. She copied him, carefully, hoping no one noticed. Across the table, a man with a perfectly groomed beard leaned toward Ethan. "Cole, you always surprise us. And who might this charming young woman be?" Before Ethan could answer, Lena smiled politely. "Just a friend." The man chuckled. "A friend, hmm? Seems you have a type grounded but unpredictable." Ethan's lips curved faintly. "I value authenticity." The conversation moved on, but the comment lingered. Lena felt heat crawl up her neck. She was not used to being the center of attention, especially in a place like this. At that moment, Victoria approached. Her designer gown shimmered under the lights, her every step rehearsed like a scene from a movie. "Ethan," she said with a smooth smile that did not reach her eyes, "I am surprised to see you here, and with company no less." Ethan stood, polite but distant. "Congratulations, Victoria. You look radiant." Her gaze shifted to Lena, lingering just long enough to make the girl uncomfortable. "And you are?" Lena rose slowly, her voice steady. "Lena Brooks." "Ah," Victoria said, her smile sharpening. "I do not recall seeing your name in any of our circles." "I imagine we do not travel in the same ones," Lena replied, her tone quiet but firm. For a brief moment, the air between them froze. Then Victoria laughed lightly. "How refreshing." Well, Ethan always did have interesting tastes. Here. Ethan placed a protective hand on the back of Lena's chair. "Enjoy your evening, Victoria," he said calmly, then turned away. As they sat again, Lena exhaled softly. "Was that your ex-fiancée?" "Yes." "She seems intense." "That is a kind word," he replied. For a few minutes, they ate in silence. The pianist shifted to a slower tune, something romantic, something that made people linger in their seats. When Ethan spoke again, his voice was quieter. "Why were you out there tonight under that awning?" Lena hesitated. "I used to work at the Grandview Hotel downtown. They laid off most of the staff last month. I could not pay rent after my mother's surgery. Things just went downhill." He looked at her, not with pity, but with an understanding he had not expected to feel. "You are still standing," he said softly. "That counts for something." She gave a small, weary smile. "Standing is easy. Living is harder." Their eyes met briefly before a sudden burst of laughter from another table broke the moment. A drunk guest staggered near them, holding a glass of red wine. "Hey, Cole," the man slurred loudly. "You sure know how to make an entrance. Who is the lucky lady?" Ethan's tone stayed even. "A friend." The man looked Lena up and down with a smirk. "A friend? She looks like she came straight from the subway. You could have done better." Gasps rippled through the nearby tables. Ethan's expression froze, but before he could speak, Lena rose. Her voice was calm and clear. "You are right," she said softly. I did come from the subway. I took it every morning for work until I lost my job. But I can tell you one thing, it teaches you who you really are when you have nothing to hide behind." The man blinked, speechless. Murmurs spread through the guests. Someone clapped quietly, unsure if it was appropriate. Ethan stood beside her, his voice low but firm. "Apologize." The man stammered. I did not mean—" "Then perhaps next time you should mean your words less," Ethan said coldly. Victoria watched from across the room, her perfect smile cracking just a little. When they sat down again, Lena's hands were trembling slightly. Ethan leaned closer. "You handled that better than most people I know." "I just told the truth," she said, trying to steady her breath. "Truth is rare in rooms like this," he murmured. The orchestra shifted to a livelier tune. Laughter resumed, but the mood at their table had changed. People now looked at Lena differently, some with judgment, some with quiet admiration. Ethan poured her another glass of water, his expression unreadable. "You did not just survive that," he said softly. "You owned it." Lena gave a small, uncertain smile. "I was just trying not to embarrass you." "You did the opposite," Ethan replied. "You reminded me why I wanted someone real beside me tonight." The music swelled again, the chandeliers glittered, and for the first time that evening, the crowd's whispers no longer mattered. In that sea of perfection, it was the woman who had once lived on the streets who now held her head the highest. And though neither of them said it out loud, they both knew something had shifted. This was no longer just a contract. It was the beginning of something neither of them had planned for. When the dinner ended, the orchestra shifted to a softer melody. Couples drifted to the dance floor, the air heavy with perfume and candlelight. Ethan stood quietly beside the table, his gaze distant. Lena watched him, unsure if she should say something. He seemed miles away, trapped in a memory that still hurt. Victoria's laughter floated from the other side of the room. She was in the arms of her new husband, smiling for the photographers. For a second, Ethan's mask cracked. His jaw tightened before he turned to Lena. "Come with me," he said softly. They slipped out through a side corridor that led to the terrace. Cool night air brushed against their faces. The city lights shimmered below, stretching endlessly into the dark. Ethan loosened his tie, exhaling a breath he had been holding all evening. "I thought I was past it," he said quietly. "But standing there, seeing her smile like nothing ever happened, it feels like being erased." Lena leaned on the railing beside him. "You are not erased. You are just done with that chapter." Ember. He glanced at her, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "You make it sound simple." "It never is," she replied. "But pretending you do not feel anything does not make you stronger. It just makes you lonely." For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind. Ethan looked at her differently now, not as a stranger, not as a hired guest, but as someone who understood the weight he carried. "You surprise me, Lena," he said. "You should not have to be this wise." Life teaches fast when it has to," she said with a small shrug. Ethan's phone buzzed, lighting his face briefly. A message from a board member flashed across the screen, a reminder that business never slept. He silenced it and looked back at her. "You know, when I offered that contract, I thought I was being clever, safe. I did not expect you to walk into that ballroom and handle them better than I ever could." Lena smiled faintly. "I did not do it for them. I did it for me. I wanted to leave that room knowing I did not let anyone make me small." He nodded slowly. "You did more than that. You made me see what authenticity looks like." For a moment, their eyes met, and the distance between them seemed to fade. The city lights reflected in his eyes, softening the cold edges that success had carved into him. Then Lena stepped back, breaking the silence. "It is getting late. You should go back inside." Ethan hesitated, then said quietly, "Stay a while. The noise in there is not what I need right now." She looked at him, unsure. But then she saw it, the quiet exhaustion in his face, the kind that came from years of holding everything together. She nodded. They stood side by side in silence, two people from opposite worlds sharing the same fragile moment. Down below, the city pulsed with life, indifferent to the story unfolding above it, a story that had begun with a deal but was slowly turning into something real. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Ethan's penthouse. The city was quiet, washed clean after the rain. Lena stood near the glass wall, wrapped in a robe that the housekeeper had left for her. It was soft and warm, but she still felt out of place, like a visitor in a life that was not meant for her. Ethan entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. He looked rested, calmer than the night before. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." She nodded. "Too well. I cannot remember the last time I slept in a real bed." He handed her a cup and leaned against the counter. "About last night," he began. "You did more than I asked. You showed me something I forgot. Existed grace without pretense." Lena took a slow sip of coffee, unsure how to respond. "You gave me a chance. That is all I needed." He smiled faintly. "Still, you did not have to defend me in front of everyone, especially not her." Lena's chazam hiss. "You did not need defending. You just needed someone to remind you you are more than their gossip." Ethan's expression softened. For a man who spent his life surrounded by people, it struck him how long it had been since anyone had spoken to him like that. Later that afternoon, Ethan had to return to his company for a board meeting. He offered to have his driver take Lena wherever she wanted to go, but she refused politely. "I will find my own way," she said. When he left, she wandered through the quiet apartment. Everything was perfect, the marble floors, the art, the silence, yet it felt strangely hollow. She noticed a framed photograph on the piano, Ethan shaking hands with a group of executives. His smile was practiced, his eyes tired. She whispered to herself, "All this, and he still looks lonely." By evening, Ethan returned. He found Lena in the kitchen, trying to help the housekeeper set the table. "You do not need to do that," he said, amused. "I like feeling useful," she replied. "I cannot just sit here and watch people work around me." Dinner was quiet but warm. Halfway through the meal, Ethan set down his glass. "Lena, I know this arrangement was supposed to end last night, but I would like you to stay a few more days. There are events I have to attend, and people will ask questions if I show up alone again." Lena studied him, her voice careful. "You mean you want me to keep pretending?" "I mean," Ethan said slowly, "that I would rather not do this without you. You have a way of making everything feel less artificial." She looked down at her plate thinking, "All right," she said finally, "but only if you let me pay you back somehow." He raised an eyebrow. "Pay me back?" "Yes," she said with a small smile. "You took me to your world. Now let me show you mine." Ethan tilted his head, intrigued. "Your world?" "The one where coffee costs $2 and the people remember your name," she said lightly. For the first time in a long while, Ethan laughed a real, unguarded laugh that reached his eyes. And in that moment, as the sound filled the quiet apartment, neither of them noticed how natural it had become for two strangers bound by a contract to start speaking like old friends. Outside, the city glowed in shades of amber and silver, and somewhere between their two worlds, something genuine had begun to take root. The peace did not last long. 3 days later, Ethan's name appeared on every business headline. A photograph had been leaked him and Lena sitting in the diner laughing together. The caption read, "Millionaire Ethan Cole seen with mystery woman from the streets." By the time he reached his office, his assistant looked pale. "Sir, the board wants an emergency meeting. They are calling it a scandal. Investors are nervous." Ethan's expression darkened. "Over a cup of coffee?" "They are saying it reflects poorly on the company's image," she said softly. That afternoon, the boardroom felt colder than usual. Cameras had captured every whisper of the gossip. The oldest director leaned forward. "Ethan, the company's reputation is not yours alone. If you choose to involve yourself with someone like her, you put everything we have built at risk." Ethan's tone stayed even. "Her name is Lena, and she has more integrity than half the people in this room." A murmur of disapproval followed. One man slammed a folder shut. "You are letting sentiment cloud your judgment." Ethan stood, his voice calm but cutting. "My judgment built this company. If kindness ruins it, then maybe it deserves to fall." He left the room before they could answer. When he arrived home, Lena was gone. On the kitchen counter lay the silver pen he had given her, and a short note written in her neat handwriting. "You have already given me more than I ever asked for. Do not lose what you worked for because of me." He read it twice, the words blurring as anger and regret tangled inside him. He had promised himself he would not let his heart get in the way again, yet somehow it already had. News channels replayed the photo all evening. Reporters waited outside his building, shouting questions. Ethan ignored them all. For the first time in years, he did not care about the headlines. He only cared that the woman who had made him feel human again had walked out of his life to protect his name. He picked up the pen, turned it over in his hand, and whispered to the empty room, "You were never the problem, Lena. I was." A week passed. and the noise around the scandal began to fade. But Ethan could not shake the silence that filled his penthouse. Every corner reminded him of Lena, the laughter in the kitchen, the soft echo of her footsteps, the way she had made the cold space feel alive for the first time. One morning, his assistant knocked on the office door. "Sir, there is something you should see." She handed him a newspaper. The headline read, "Community Center for the Homeless launches new program led by former waitress, Lena Brooks." Ethan froze. Beneath the headline was a photo of Lena standing in front of a small brick building, surrounded by volunteers. She looked happy, radiant in her simple jeans and white shirt. He stared at the image for a long time, then said quietly, "Get the car." When he arrived at the center, Lena was outside helping a group of children sort donated clothes. She looked up, surprised, as he approached. "Ethan," she said softly, "you should not be here. The cameras will follow you again." "Ugh. I do not care," he said simply. "I came because I needed to tell you something." She looked uneasy. "You do not owe me anything." "That is where you are wrong," he said. "You gave me back my humanity." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check, but the amount made her blink. "What is this?" "It is not charity," he said. "It is a partnership. You once told me kindness is a currency. Let us invest in it together. I want to fund this place under your direction." Tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan, you do not have to do this." "I know," he said gently, "but I want to." The cameras that had once hunted them now captured something else, a man standing beside a woman who had nothing to offer but sincerity, and a man who finally understood that was worth everything. That night, as the press released the photos, the headlines changed. Ethan Cole funds Second Chance Foundation with Lena Brooks as director. For the first time, the world was stunned not by scandal, but by grace. 6 months later, the Second Chance Foundation had become one of the most talked-about programs in the city. The same news anchors who once mocked Ethan Cole's judgment now praised his vision. Under Lena's leadership, the foundation opened shelters, job training programs, and meal centers across several neighborhoods. Every interview she gave began the same way. "I was just someone who needed a chance. Now I try to give that chance back." Ethan rarely spoke in public anymore. He let Lena take the spotlight, quietly supporting her from behind the scenes. Yet every morning, he stopped by the center with fresh coffee, walking the same halls that had once been abandoned warehouses. Staff members had grown used to seeing him in rolled-up sleeves instead of suits, lifting boxes, talking with families, listening. On the anniversary of the foundation's opening, they held a small ceremony in the courtyard. Balloons floated above the tables, and the children who once came for food now performed a short song they had written for Miss Lena. When the music faded, the crowd cheered, and Ethan stepped up to the microphone. "I used to think success was about winning," he said. "Now I know it is about giving. A year ago, I met someone who reminded me that dignity cannot be bought, and kindness is never wasted. She changed my life, and through her, she changed this city." He turned toward Lena and opened a small velvet box. Inside was not a diamond, but the silver pen she had left behind months earlier, now engraved with her initials beside his. The crowd fell silent as he spoke. "This pen once signed a contract between strangers," he said softly. "Tonight, I hope it will sign something real. Lena Brooks, will you marry me?" Tears shimmered in her eyes as she covered her mouth in disbelief. "Ethan!" He smiled, steady and sure. "No contracts this time. No pretending." The audience erupted in applause as she nodded, unable to speak. He slipped the pen into her hand instead of a ring, and she laughed through her tears. "Trust you to propose with a pen. It started our story," he said. "It should write the rest." Ugh! They stood beneath strings of soft lights as the applause grew louder. Reporters captured the moment, but this time, neither of them cared. The headlines that followed the next morning read, "Ethan Cole and Lena Brooks, from contract to commitment." Later that night, after the guests had left, Lena walked through the quiet courtyard. Ethan joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. They sat on the edge of the fountain, the city glowing beyond the fence. "Do you ever miss the old life?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "The titles, maybe, but not the loneliness." She smiled. "You were never really lonely. You were just waiting for the right noise to fill the silence." He looked at her for a long moment, then whispered, "You are that noise, Lena." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and for the first time since the night they met under the rain, Everything felt complete. A gentle breeze rippled through the courtyard banners that read Second Chance Foundation. The lights above them flickered softly, reflecting in the water at their feet. Ethan's voice was low but full of peace. We started with a deal, and we ended with the truth. Lena smiled, closing her eyes. And that truth is love. The camera of the story pulled back in silence, leaving only the glow of the city and two silhouettes, proof that even the coldest contracts can lead to the warmest hearts. Voiceover fade out. True leadership is not about power. It is about compassion. And true love is not found in perfection, but in honesty. Sometimes, the richest hearts are born from the simplest chances.